Hi there, welcome to Let's Talk Tottenham. Again, something very different today, very excited about this. Another book has been written, this time about one of Tottenham's greatest ever players, arguably their greatest ever player, Dave Mackay. I'm joined by Mike Donovan, who wrote the book. How you doing, Mike? And thanks so much for coming on.
That's my pleasure.
Excellent. And for anyone who doesn't know what the book looks like, here is a picture of the front cover. Dave Mackay, football's Braveheart, and the authorised biography that Mike wrote. And if anyone's interested in buying it, I'll put this on a few times. You can buy it at www.pitchpublishing.co.uk/shop/footballs Braveheart. So I highly encourage you to go out and buy that. And we're basically talking here with Mike today all about the book, all about his Dave Mackay stories, and a bit about the Tottenham of today and how we'd kill for someone of Dave Mackay's calibre, I'm sure. So first off, Mike, what inspired you to write the book? I know, speaking to you, that you think he's our greatest ever player. So was that the inspiration for it, or was there something else that made you decide to write it?
Well, there was one. That was one reason. I mean, he was the best player Spurs have ever had. I think Jimmy Greaves was always my favourite player because he was a striker and scored all the goals and got the glory. But overall, Dave Mackay had it all, and he was kind of the best player they ever had. And also, I don't think it was fully recognised. I wanted to kind of. I think a lot of people neglect history. People of today, football supporters today, unaware often of what has made Spurs who they are today. And it's largely because of the team that Dave Mackay was the star of, and that won the double. And I felt, that deserved to be recognised. I mean, if you've got to have an authorised biography on the greatest player ever to put on a lily white shirt,
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit in the book as well with Harry Redknapp where he's almost flabbergasted that Dave Mackay's got an invite to go to one of the games that Redknapp was managing. He's like, he doesn't need an invite. He's Dave Mackay, so I guess that links into he was underrated. Maybe not underrated, but not recognised as one of the greatest of all time.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's easy, isn't it? Players drift from club to club, and they drift into the past, and people just forget about them, and it's just not fair, really. I mean, that team. I know it's probably an unfair on a lot of teams that have followed it, but they're always all the subsequent teams, Spurs, have been compared to that double team, and when you think that was probably arguably the best club team ever, in my opinion, but for what it's worth, and he was the star of that team, and now Spurs have lived off of that team for 60 years, and they've yet to win the league since his team won it.
Yeah, it's very similar kind of to England and '66, and every team, World Cup team, Euros team is compared to the '66 team. But yeah, for anyone who's watching, please hit like, please hit subscribe. They all help, and please send your comments and questions in for Mike about anything Dave Mackay related. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer. And a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be like me, a little bit too young to know too much about Dave Mackay's footballing story, know of the name. But yeah, any questions, any stories you've heard and want clarifying, please hit them up in the comments, and I'll ask Mike those. In terms of the research, is that from you? You watched him in the '60s, so you knew quite a bit about it. I know there's his brother and Dennis Law do is it the forwards? I think that's the definition. So was it a lot asking the family, friends, and his, as well as your recollections of him playing? What went into the research for the book?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, I saw Dave Mackay from '61 onwards play for Spurs, so I knew the player live, standing on the East Stand terraces, in front of the shelf. So I knew all about him as a player, but you can't rely on just your memories, and I felt that for a player of his stature, I wanted to do the full Monty. I wanted to speak to people that played with him, who knew him, were friends of his, but especially the family. I thought the family were absolutely fundamental to the story, and I mean, I was hoping that they would climb on board, and they did wholeheartedly, and a wonderful, wonderful family. So yeah, that was it was a pleasure, really. A labour of love to do it, but a lot of hard work. As somebody once said, it's 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. Yeah, there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts. You can't say, "Oh, I'll have a day off here," or it's kind of it's and you've got to love the subject, I think, to write about it. I mean, I could get a commission to write a book on somebody that wouldn't float my boat, but I think really to write a book from the heart is the way to go, because you can't if you haven't got your heart in the book, you're wasting your time, really.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did it take from I'm going to write a Dave Mackay book to finishing the book? I'm assuming a couple of years, maybe.
Oh no, it took about a year in total. I mean, it's kind of it was all through the pandemic. Well, it was still ongoing, isn't it? But it was through the pandemic, so I had to do everything remotely, and but and of course the hardest part about it was the transcribing. Really, the interviews were fantastic because everybody loved Dave Mackay. I mean, I don't think it's one of these things with biographies. It depends on where you're coming from, but some biographies are kind of like kiss and tell type biographies who just want to dish the dirt and that kind of thing. I mean, I was dreading finding any skeletons in this guy's cupboard, and I didn't. I mean, I spoke to everybody you can imagine. As I said, people who played with him, played against him, who knew him. I mean, in the game, and his family and friends. I mean, I tried to not leave any stone unturned. And I mean, you could say, it's kind of it's non-critical, but why write a book? Why go out to write a book that's critical? I mean, you just write what you find, and with Dave Mackay, everything was, everybody had nothing but admiration for the guy. So which is a relief to me in many ways, because I mean, you don't want your heroes to have any, as I said, any skeleton. But
Yeah, yeah. Like you say, everyone you speak to speaks so highly of him. So it makes sense that there's no skeletons, but I guess it's always a worry with one of your heroes. I've got a message from Ian. How you doing, Ian? Thanks for watching. Any questions anyone has, ping them over in the comments and we'll ask Mike those. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stories of Dave Mackay. What was your favourite Dave Mackay story? Your favourite one that you read, or the favourite one that you wrote, or your favourite part of the book, or the favourite chapter or part of his footballing career that you wrote? What was your favourite?
Well, favourite story, crikey.
I know that's a bit of a tough question because there's hundreds of them. I'm narrowing it down. You've got to pick one. Got to pick one.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, I don't know. Well, there's one quick one that I can think of. I'm not sure necessarily the best story or my favourite story, but it's one I just thought of. It's that infamous picture of that incident with Billy Bremner. When Dave Mackay come back from after breaking his leg twice, and I was at the game actually. It happened right in front of me, and Billy Bremner deliberately kicked him on his left leg, the leg that had been broken twice, and as that picture from Monte Fresco depicts, he sort of he kind of he wasn't too pleased. I mean, Isabel, Dave's widow, said, "I thought he was going to boot Bremner out of the ground." It was like he was kind of it was, such, everybody went crazy, because I mean, Jimmy Greaves apparently had said that Brendan had gone over the top on him earlier in the game, and then to do it to Dave Mackay, it was just unbelievable. So you thought, well, that picture depicts how angry he was, but apparently after the game, him and Billy went out for a drink and had a chat. And they got on really well.
Yeah.
So you think, I suppose it's kind of like the red mist descended for a few seconds. I mean, even if even if it's your best mate, who kicked you, you would lose it for a bit, and that's what happened. And
Well, that's all the fact he was a leader and a winner, doesn't it? It doesn't matter who your friends are. When you're on the football pitch, I'm there to win. It doesn't matter who's there. I'm there to win, come what may. And
yeah,
I think all friendships go out the window.
Yeah, sorry. I think that was his biggest quality, actually. I mean, you can talk about his hardness and how tough he was in the tackle, and you can talk about his ball skills and how he used to juggle the ball when he came on the field to intimidate apparently to intimidate the opposition to show how good he was. But the overall thing was, and Cliff Jones said this in the book, his teammate and a lot of people, that he was a winner. It was kind of not a win at all costs. It was a hard but fair attitude. He kind of, and what he did was he inspired that team. I mean, it kind of Bill Nicholson, when he took over, had a reasonable team. But then when he bought Mackay, that turned a reasonable team into a great team just by his mere presence, because he had this charisma.
But he earmarked Dave Mackay pretty early on, didn't he? So he went for him twice, didn't he? At Hearts, got told no the first time, and then I guess got lucky the second time that Hearts let him go.
Well, that's right. He'd never even thought of any. Hearts was his hometown team, the team he grew up with supporting, and he never had any intention of moving ever. And then, say Bill Nicholson approached Tommy Walker at Hearts, the Hearts manager, and as you said, was rebuffed. And then Bill went for Mel Charles, who was the brother of John Charles, who was a famous Welsh legend, or is a famous Welsh legend, and then in the meantime, and then Mel turned him down, and Bill was absolutely delighted, because then he could go back for Dave Mackay, and that's what happened. And he kind of he was absolutely stunned that the Hearts wanted to sell him. I mean, he was just Hearts through and through, Dave, and he never even thought about it. And then he said, well, if they're talking to Spurs and invite Billy Nicholson up, it's clear they want to sell me, and so he said, so he thought, well, okay, I'll go. But he didn't want to go. It wasn't it wasn't something he'd even thought about. I mean, it was all happened in a blur over a couple of days. It was kind of, he didn't know he had a decision to make until he had to make it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of rushed through because it was a transfer deadline, and Bill was keen to help save Spurs from relegation. Would you believe? I mean, that was
3 years later, win the double is quite a turnaround. That.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We've got a question from Ian. I know the answer to this question, but I'll let you answer it. Cheers, Ian. Did you speak to Dave? He said, I believe he hated the pick as it made him look like a thug. We're talking about the Billy Bremner pick. But he looked shit scared. About Dave, absolutely agree, taken way too early. But did you speak to Dave? I know you met him at Jimmy Greaves' 70th birthday, and I mean, you must have spoken to so many people that are now historical legends at Tottenham. But how was Dave when you spoke to him there?
Well, Dave was about as far from being a thug as you could imagine when I met him. I mean, he was kind of a humble, nice bloke, a nice, calm guy. I mean, in fact, when I went into this was Jimmy Greaves' 70th birthday celebration at the O2, and there was basically a Q&A. I mean, getting Jimmy to work on his birthday, I thought was a bit harsh, but he had to do like a stand-up routine, and he had all his teammates there lined up to talk to. But yeah, I mean, I went in and there was like Jeff Hurst and Martin Peters was there, George Cohen from all the World Cup and all his and I was sort of like, my jaw was dropping. I mean, I can talk to like modern day players and it wouldn't mean anything, and yet I walked into that room and I was sort of like a gibbering wreck, and then and at first I didn't actually see Dave Mackay. I didn't see him, and then he was like, and he was sort of sitting quietly, in the corner, and and I was kind of trying to kind of. I thought, well, let's say something. When you meet heroes, you think, oh goodness, don't make an idiot of yourself, and you always usually end up saying something silly. And he was just so polite. I mean, I can't remember what I said to him. It was probably a load of rubbish, but he was so nice, lovely, But as I say, it was that kind of. He had this image on the field where he was this kind of big tough guy, no nonsense character, and he couldn't be further away from being a thug, And as I said, it was just that. I mean, like anybody would react if somebody kicked them in the shin after they'd broken their leg twice. What would you do? You wouldn't say, "Oh, thanks very much," would you?
Yeah. You were saying backstage as well. He never ever got sent off. He got sent off once, but it got rescinded. So what's the story behind that?
Oh yeah, well that was interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was against Nottingham Forest. No, sorry, Bristol City. Sorry, it was against an ex-Forest. It was a guy called Johnny Quigley who used to play for Forest, and basically it was a throw-in for Spurs, and then Johnny Quigley basically threw the ball in Dave Mackay's face. And Dave wasn't best pleased about it, and I'm not quite sure what area of Johnny Quigley's body he connected with, but he connected with it, as far as I understand.
A kick or a punch or something.
I wasn't at the game actually, but I didn't actually see the full detail. But and so like the referee was going to send Mackay off because he'd only seen what Mackay had done, and then Mackay persuaded, in quotes, Quigley to come over and explain what had happened to the referee, and he said, basically, let's be honest about this, and and it all sort of died away, and he wasn't sent off. He actually had been sent off initially, but then obviously the referee had forgotten he'd done it, and after Quigley, that was the year that Spurs won the cup actually in 1967. That was on the run to that final victory.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, you'd never ever say that with a player like that these days to be sent off every 2 games. But we'll talk about the comparisons to Mackay and today's players in a bit. But in terms of the 70th birthday, did you get to speak to Greaves, Bill Nicholson, a few others?
Yeah, I mean, Bill wasn't there as far as I remember. It was just the players. I mean, I kind of. Pat Jennings was there. I had a chat with him. I can't remember specifically what was said, but I mean, I was working for Back Pass magazine, which is like a retro football magazine, and I was sort of gathering some quotes on Jimmy, and Terry Dyson was there. Bobby Smith was still alive then. He was a centre forward in the Spurs double team, and he was there on crutches actually. I mean that was quite poignant really, because in those days, kind of, science hadn't sort of developed sufficiently to protect a lot of these players. I mean, he survived on a lot of painkillers, Bobby Smith, and that came, and that sort of in later life, obviously, that kind of showed. But he was. I'm trying to think now. What was Martin Chivers was there. I mean, Steve Perryman. I mean, it was just like a who's who of Spurs legends, really. It was, as I said to you earlier, it's hard for me to think what I said to them because I was just gibbering around.
Yeah.
I wasn't my professional objective self there. I was trying to be, but
I think anyone would be the same when they meet people of that standing and that legendary status. Yeah, I'd be a gibbering wreck. I'm pretty sure.
Well, it's sort of hard. It's sort of kind of you should be able to kind of screen, put a mask on and stuff in situations like that. But as I said to you earlier, it's kind of I can do that every week. When I cover football matches, I can do that, and it's I don't think twice about it really. It's just a job. But when you kind of like people that, of your era that mean something to you. I mean, these guys. There's three people who won World Cup for England, and that's the only time they've ever done it. And then there they are, and I know they're only flesh and blood like all of us, and they're own, but it's kind of, it was just an honest reaction, really. I can sit here and say, I should be more professional and this kind of thing, but basically. I'm a fan and passionate about the game and love the game, and there are these people doing wonders for the game and for our country. So, it was that's the way it was. And to say Jimmy, although Jimmy was a bit. I thought he was kind of obviously a bit preoccupied having to work on his birthday. I mean, he was lovely as well. I mean, Jimmy Greaves, he was as well as being, he was my main football hero, but he was charming. I mean, I got to interview him once, and he's charm personified. It's this easy going like language, sense of humour, and kind of honesty. Straight talking, but like he did on TV, he kind of. With Saint and Greavesy, he come across as a bit of a national treasure, because of the way he was. But he was a bit tense that night, I think, just because, he had to go out and perform in front of a big crowd. So, but it was a lovely evening, I've got to say. I mean, but it was all these. It was like the green room or whatever, or the side room to the stage, and it was absolutely jam packed. It wasn't that big, so it was like. You could hardly move for like, legends. Quite a night.
My dad's hero. I know that.
Oh, he was amazing. I mean, he electrified White Hart Lane. Really, the way he kind of, as soon as he got the ball, the whole whole place just lit up. And he was just a complete natural. As well as a poach, he could score goals after beating about 5 or 6 players. I mean. He just. I don't think anybody can touch him. Really, you can look at all the stats. I mean, there's enough stats on Jimmy. I mean, he's 357 goals. I mean, nobody will ever score more goals in the Premier League. Even Shearer didn't get anywhere near his total.
No.
It's off the charts, he's kind of, his record for England, 44 goals in 57 games. I mean, what happened? He won a game. I mean, it's just unbelievable, unbelievable. But anyway, that's you get me onto Jimmy Greaves now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. For anyone tuning in, we're talking about Dave Mackay, Mike Donovan's new book, Football's Braveheart. Dave Mackay. We're talking about. The book and all about Dave Mackay as well. If you want to buy the book and haven't already, you can get that at www.pitchpublishing.co.uk/shop/footballs Braveheart. Now, this question, you've already answered this, but I do have a separate question for it. But yeah, before we get there, Truth82, thanks for watching. Hello, Chris Mike. Dave Mackay was before my time, sadly. You're with me there, Truth82. But I heard all the stories from those who saw him. He was a beast, but a clever one too. I mean, would you agree with that? He was a beast, but a clever beast?
I don't know. Well, beast. Yeah, I know what
I think he means beast as in a complimentary term, as in a warrior and just... not to be trifled with, rather than an animal.
I suppose. I mean, it's yeah. I guess you could say that. I mean, it's just that, as I said, this aura. I know it's a rubbish word, really, but he had this kind of, or he had this presence, and everybody. I mean, everybody in the team. You're talking about superstars in their own right. Were kind of inspired because they didn't want to let Dave Mackay down. You know, they knew if they let Dave Mackay down, that was unacceptable. You kind this is what I said to you earlier about Bill Nicholson said. And Cliff Jones
Beast is
agrees
in
with me.
dominant player.
He kind of transformed that team. I mean, it was like if there's one individual uh, who transformed Spurs' greatest ever team and arguably the greatest club team. It was Dave Mackay, and that's and it's more you can say he's a beast, you can say he's a skilled player, and he was both of those things. But he was also he had this kind of mentality, this refusal to accept defeat. I mean, even in five-a-side training games, or playing snooker or playing golf. I mean, there was a story Jimmy Robertson told me about. They were playing golf in the pouring rain, and the ball. Jimmy said, "Oh, can I move the ball? It's stuck in a puddle." He's going, "No, you play your shot." You wouldn't let him. You wouldn't let him friendly little game, and he just refused to let him move his ball because it was stuck in a puddle. I mean, he snapped. And Terry Dyson told me a story where they were playing snooker, and he sort of snapped his snooker cue in half because he was so angry that he got beaten or something. Or he missed a shot or something, and it kind of even his there's a friend of his called Ninian Cassidy who was one of his best friends. And that was a touching thing in the book. I felt, his recollections of Dave, and he kind of found, look, if they're playing, I think it was another snooker game actually, and saying that, and if he beat him, like, you sort of steer clear of him for a few minutes, and then he can't, and then he would calm down. It was,
Yeah, but do you think that art of refusing to accept defeat has kind of been lost in the game? You've obviously had some. You mentioned in the book that leaders in the Premier League, your Vieiras, your Gerrards, your Terrys, Keane. I mean, Keane for me was the best Premier League captain that there's ever been. But that they are, like you say in the book, very few and far between these days. Whereas I get the feeling in Mackay's era they were a bit more common. But and then Dave Mackay was obviously the top of those charts. But do you think that kind of leadership mentality that I am refusing to lose has kind of been lost on the game now?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you can't say any player goes out there to lose,
No.
but it's a question of mentality and strength of mind. And it's kind of, yeah, Roy Keane had that without doubt, with that will to win, and refusal to accept defeat. I mean, he had that quality. I don't think he wasn't in the same league as Dave Mackay as a player, in my opinion. But in terms of his will to win, I mean, it couldn't be faulted really. But it is. Yes, it has been lost. And I mean, obviously, because the laws have been changing and the approach of referees to matches, players like Dave Mackay probably wouldn't survive very long. You couldn't, it's kind of this. I mean, we've all seen that 1970 FA Cup replay between Leeds and Chelsea, which I think it was David Ellery was the referee, and I mean, some of the tackles should have provoked GBH charges, let alone. And but that's how it was, I mean, there's a great shot at another game of George Best going through on goal against Chelsea, and then Chopper Harris, living up to his nickname, kind of slid right across and took him out, or tried to take him out rather, but then Best somehow kept his balance and scored. And it was a different kind of era where there was the physicality. I mean, it's been talked about today. The lack of physicality and the lack of kind of honesty sometimes with players. Particularly in diving, or simulation, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's sort of embarrassing and pathetic, particularly when you've got about 1,000 cameras honed in on you. I mean, you can quite clearly see when you've actually died, and trying to con people. I mean, that wasn't in Mackay's makeup or players like him. I mean, there was an honesty and a kind of, I'm not trying to paint it rose. I mean, nobody's perfect and nobody kind of is without blame and anything. But really, today they just, it's going to sound like me being from the past, but these players they've got technical skills. Yeah, they're fantastic. The technical skills are superior these days. And there's a lot of influence from the continent, I guess, in that, and that's fantastic. But what you're gaining in that, you're losing in this kind of the physical side of it. Where you can't make a tackle. I mean, I was a way below average defender, and all I could do was make sliding tackles. And if I did that today, I'd be sent off every match. It's it's a different era. The rules have changed. VAR. It's kind of that ridiculous. These VAR decisions, like Harry Kane's goal getting disallowed at Southampton. That's another thing. That's another issue.
We can get onto that maybe a bit later. Yeah. Truth 82's put another comment in. Years ago, worked with a Scotsman who made the same comparison between Dave Mackay and Roy Keane, just from a leadership perspective. Mackay apparently a far better player, which is what you were saying there. But that kind of leads us on to this. You've already answered this, but the best ever player for Spurs, in your opinion, is there anyone who's got close to that? Obviously, a lot of people will say Jimmy Greaves because of his numbers. And a lot of players, I would have thought, from that 60-61 team, just because of what they were able to accomplish. But in terms of a player, has there anyone been close? I know in the book you mentioned George. No, I'm not sure if you mentioned in the book. I saw it on Wikipedia that George Best said that he was the best player he ever played against. So that drew comparisons to me that Thierry Henry, who widely regarded as the best Premier League player ever, said Ledley King was the best player he ever played against. But best player for Spurs, but has anyone for you got close to Dave Mackay in that respect?
Well, you're talking away from the double team. I mean, because you can kind of you can people like Danny Blanchflower, John White, Cliff Jones in that category, and then obviously Jimmy Greaves. I mean, there's been sort of people that have. I don't know, Glenn Hoddle, you can't deny Glenn Hoddle was kind of like a special player and, wonderful touch and vision and everything else. And when you consider how tall he was, he didn't look your archetypal midfielder, did he? And he was kind of amazing. So he was pretty good. I mean, Ozzy Ardiles was a lovely player. I mean, he kind of glided along the ground, and Graham Roberts, although he didn't have the skill, he certainly had that kind of winning mentality. That I guess in terms of that, I think he's the nearest player I can think of to Mackay in the Spurs shirt. I mean, the way he kind of this clenched fist. Come on, let's do it for the team. And I mean, Alan Mullery was another one who, again, people used to. He had a very slow start, according to some Spurs fans at Spurs. I mean, I didn't agree with them, but he won them over, and he was a force, an underrated force. I think he was a kind of a top player. And Pat Jennings, I know, is a goalkeeper, but to my mind, he's the best goalkeeper in the world that I've ever seen. Anyway, I mean, I know I'm sort of speaking from a biased point of view, being a Spurs fan, but I think that everybody would agree that probably the biggest mistake Spurs ever had was letting Pat Jennings go when he was about 31, 32 to Arsenal. And then he had about 6 or 7 years there. And he was just an incredible goalkeeper. And they don't really, when people talk about great players, they don't often include goalkeepers. It's kind of it's all the midfielders or the strikers that get tons of goals.
Well, Ferguson once said, didn't he, a top goalkeeper wins you, 12 points a season or something like that. So if you want to beat title contenders, top goalkeeper is crucial.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, look at Schmeichel the other day. I mean, against Liverpool. I mean, talk about winning you 3 points. I mean, it's yeah, you're right, absolutely right.
And in terms of today's Spurs team, obviously the will to win and the refusal to lose from Dave Mackay, we've possibly got a manager that shares that and is on par with that. But in terms of the players, do you see any players that have that kind of mentality? Or they have a little bit of the mentality, but nowhere near what Dave had.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unfair. I mean, comparisons are unfair, aren't they? But, just because it's a different era and everything else. But
to be fair, it gives me a question to ask, though, so I'll continue to ask.
No, I'm not looking at it at all. Well, I mean, the nearest player in terms of kind of like will to win and the current team is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. I mean, he's got that kind of that grit, and that kind of determination, refusal to lose, and he gets upset when his teammates. I mean, the trouble is a lot of the Spurs team. High again. Go back to this technical thing. Highly technical players. Superb. Pace. Moore and Bergwijn, and the pacey players, and Son is phenomenal. Phenomenal all-round player. I mean, probably the best signing Spurs have made in the last 10, 20 years. And then of course there's Harry Kane, who is, I mean, what can you say about Harry Kane that hasn't been said? I mean, he kind of, he gets knocked all the time. He has slow starts to the season, and then everybody thinks he's finished, and then he ends up topping the charts in assists and goals. So, I mean, he's a fantastic player, Harry Kane. I mean, quality right the way through, and probably the one as a face, as a long-term kind of supporter. I guess he's the player I most identify with him. Maybe because he's chasing Jimmy Greaves' record. I don't know, but the way he conducts himself, I know he got in a bit of trouble against Liverpool, but we'll gloss over that one. But he is, to my mind, him and Son, I guess, are my favourites at the moment. But as far as kind of that will to win, kind of. That mentality. I mean, Højbjerg's got that, I think. But the others are...
Truth 82 is said, I want to believe that Skip will become a leader in this current team. It's far too early to say, but I think he's got all the hallmarks. So when you get someone like Jose Mourinho saying he's a future Spurs captain, that would suggest that he's seen some leadership qualities there. But again, he's very, very young. And it's his first season in the Premier League, don't forget, as well. He obviously had that really good stint at Norwich last year. But yeah, I quite like Dyer's mentality. Unfortunately, the quality that he has and the mistakes he has, although Conte has said he could become world class. But I like his attitude. I think he's I want to win. I'm not settling for anything else. And a comment from Ian as well here, if you could shed light on this, if this was the case. Mullery was Big Dave's replacement. I think he said that the fans didn't like him at first for that reason. Is that the case? Obviously, it's huge shoes to fill. You've got a guy there, Dave Mackay, who's come in, and the greatest manager in our history has said he changed things instantly, and then you've got someone replacing him after he's won everything he won. So is it true that the fans didn't like him for that reason, and was he able to turn them around?
Well, number one, he wasn't a replacement for Dave Mackay. He was a replacement for Danny Blanchflower. Because Dave Mackay was with Spurs until 1968, and Mullery joined in 64, and Blanchflower retired in 63, 64. So it was mainly it was because he replaced Blanchflower, who was an absolute class act, and he was like the manager on the field, the player who would be brave enough to change tactics in the middle of the game, and rather than go with the game plan.
That's similar to Manchester United with Rooney and Scholes and stuff. Rooney said on Sky Sports Retro or something, if they got someone sent off, Ferguson allowed them to change the tactics during the game, and then if it didn't work, then Ferguson would step in. But yeah, different. Even Ferguson, a different era. Just, I mean, I'm too young for Bill Nicholson and everything, but I'll go on record. I've been on record before and said Ferguson's the best manager I'll ever see in my lifetime by quite a distance. But yeah, sorry to cut you off there.
That's all right. Well, I mean, it would going on to Ferguson. I mean, him and Dave Mackay were great mates. And, I mean, there was one story you mentioned. What story? There was a story that Ferguson told about, not to me, unfortunately. I couldn't get hold of him in the end, but it was when I think Ferguson was playing for Queen's Park. This is in Scotland, and Dave Mackay was with Hearts, and he was on the comeback trail, Dave, from injury and playing in the reserves, and apparently, and then I think Ferguson was only I think he was just a teenager or something, and he kind of like Dave Mackay hit him with a tackle, nearly sort of split him in half, and he got up, and Ferguson got up, and was obviously his first, you can imagine kind of, what his reaction might have been. And then Dave Mackay said, I can't remember the exact story now, but he kind of he soothed the waters. Dave Mackay said something that kind of calmed him down before he did it. But he said, he felt it was like almost an honour to be tackled by Dave Mackay. And then when he was a manager at Old Trafford at Manchester United, he used to invite Dave and his family, Isabel and his son Derek and David, to matches, and they used to keep in regular touch. I mean, because Ferguson always said of Mackay that if I had to pick an all-time Scotland team, the first choice would be Dave Mackay. That was his quote, and he felt he's world class. I mean, I had a chat with Craig Brown, the old Scotland World Cup manager, who was really close pals with Sir Alex Ferguson, and during the pandemic, they were kind of like picking out their best ever World 11s and stuff, and Dan Mackay was very much in the mix for the pair of them, and so you've got somebody like Sir Alex Ferguson, who you've just described as the best ever manager, and I wouldn't dispute that at all. If he thinks of Dave Mackay that highly, and I mean, and I've always thought he's the best player, but then I'm just a Spurs fan who happened to have the privilege of seeing him and writing a book on him. I mean, Ferguson what hasn't he done in the game? I mean, he's got to be the best manager ever, and if he thinks that way about Dave Mackay, and he actually was at the funeral. Actually, he was at Dave's funeral. He gave the eulogy there, very moving eulogy. The guy, Dave Mackay's got so much respect in the game, and it's nice coming through.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Craig Brown there. One of the stories I really liked in the, I'm all for I can't think of the word. You see what I mean when I tell the story. I can't think of the word, but when he went to watch him at Hearts with his dad, and the first thing Dave Mackay did was run into the centre circle, chuck the ball in the air, backheel it in the opposition's goal. So the first thing the opposition goalkeeper had to do was pick the ball out of his net. So that's a kind of a mental thing, I guess, that the first thing I've done in this is pick the ball out of the net, and it's kind of a kind of mental thing, and Yeah, I love that story. But I mean, did he do that every game,
Well,
or
no,
was
I
that
mean
just
he
that
kind of
Craig Brown got lucky to see it at that particular game?
well he had a like a habit from what I was told of kind of like as I think I alluded to earlier about when he came out, he always used to do something flash with the ball, on the way out. So throw it up and juggle it and what have you, just to show the opposition what they're up against, And I think that kind of thing that story was as the Hearts team were coming out, and he kind of like he just without looking, he just sort of flicked the ball with the back of his heel and from the halfway line. I mean, and Craig Brown also tells another good story about. He said when he was a kid, uh, he had sort of pretensions of being a footballer, and his dad said, "Look, if you want to be a footballer, you've got to come and see Dave Mackay." And he took him to Tynecastle. No, it wasn't Tynecastle. Sorry, I can't remember where it was now. It was over in the west of Scotland, not in the east, and it was near Philly where the Brown family lived. And Dave Mackay had a used to be able to, you know, yeah, it was the Rory Delap from, I don't know if you remember him, Southampton, one of the a real long throw, and Craig Brown. Craig Brown was sort of told by his dad, "Look, I'm taking you to see Hearts, not because it's Hearts, but to see Dave Mackay. If you want to see a footballer, if you want to be a footballer, watch this guy." And then Craig Brown was getting so excited that when Dave Mackay was taking one of his long throws, he rushed down to the front just to touch Dave Mackay's shirt as he was taking the throw in. And it's his, I think he's his favourite player. So a lot of these guys have kind of grew up with Dave Mackay, and these are guys you respect in football. I mean, Craig Brown, you couldn't get a more respected person about Scottish football. I mean, and he's saying these things about Dave Mackay. I mean, it's not just me. This is what I was trying to get over in the book. Really, that it's not just me who thinks he walks on water. It's people like Ferguson, like Craig Brown, like all his Spurs friends, mates who were like superstars in their own right. I mean, these were people. I mean, I didn't have to kind of cajole them into saying these things. They just they were desperate to talk to him. I couldn't shut them up about him. Because he was kind of that rated.
Yeah. Ian's got a question here. How many Scotland caps did he win?
He won 22, which was absolute disgrace, really. I mean, it was at times when he first got into the Scotland setup, it was kind of run by selectors, rather than managers. Managers didn't pick the team or pick the squads. So, and then I think he got blamed. I think it was England, Scotland, and I think Scotland lost, and Mackay got the blame for it for whatever reason, and he wasn't selected again for ages. And I think it was this. I think Dennis Law said to me, and I think Ferguson would agree that it was the bias on the Anglos, the Anglo Scots who came south of the border, i.e., deserting their home country to find fame and fortune in England, and they tended to, not get totally ignored, but they were kind of like, they'd rather have sort of people who stayed in Scotland and played in Scotland, and that worked against it, and that's what limited his appearances. Also, of course, there were less internationals. There was a lot of friendlies, and then you had the World Cup every 4 years. But Mackay got to one World Cup, and but it's the way it was. I think that it's a shame. 22. I mean, when you think nowadays, when how many very average players get 50, 60 caps, and and it's absolute travesty, really. Somebody of his caliber, to get 22 caps. But there you are. That was the way it was. It was a mixture of things. To say the selectors, in fact, it was a selected system, and then he went out of favour because of that. Because so it all in the end didn't reflect. I mean, really, he should have had 200 caps, or 222 caps. Not 22 caps.
Yeah, yeah. It's similar to like Gary Mabbott hardly got any caps for England, and he was a superb defender. But one of the things compared to today that I found incredible was he broke his leg, came back, broke his leg again, came back. Whereas now you get players who run past the player and then fall down and then get stretched off. That isn't new, and obviously you've mentioned the diving there. We have to say Harry Kane's done that in the past. So has Dele Alli. So has Gareth Bale. So we have to say our players have done it as well as the Ronaldos, the Hazards, the Fernandes, the Salahs, and what have you. But it seems like every day, every club now has a player who has dived or does dive. I mean, did Dave have a comment about that? What is wrong with these wimps? Because it's been going on for a long while, or if he didn't, what do you think he'd make of these play acting things now, whereas he only went down when someone's kicked his already just recovered broken ankle?
Well, yeah, I mean, before I answer that question, it reminded me of a story about, he wouldn't, I mean, Cliff Jones told me that, if Dave Mackay was down and injured, you knew, he was injured, you knew it. And there was one game in the European Cup against Feyenoord at White Hart Lane, and Dave Mackay went up for a header with a defender, cracked heads, and it was on the ground. And Cliff Jones looked at him, and there was blood seeping from his ear, up from Dave Mackay's ear. He fractured his skull, and anyway, he went off to get a bit of treatment, and then Cliff Jones thought, "Oh, well, that's the end of Dave Mackay for the evening." And then about, I don't know, 10 minutes later or something, there's a roar from the crowd, and like Cliff Jones looks over to the sidelines where they're bringing the players on, and there's Dave Mackay. He's ready to come on, and he's kind of, it wasn't diagnosed at the time, and it was a hairline fracture, but and then they kind of, and I think in the dressing room afterwards, Dave Mackay collapsed and was taken to hospital and stuff. But it was this, you cannot. I mean, well, it wouldn't be allowed these days because of health and safety. But can you imagine a player these days, doing that or having the chance? If they had the opportunity, would they do that? Because
it wasn't a huge amount of time ago that you had Paul Ince doing it in Rome and Terry Butcher in 90 or 89 or whatever. But yeah, these days, not at all. And with the concussions and fractures, quite rightly, I think they're not allowed to because of health and safety. But yeah, it's just where you see like a player rolling around because someone's just clipped. And he carried on playing after two broken ankles, and then, like you say, with a hairline fracture and carried on. It's just a different. It's a mentality, a completely different mentality, and just it's alien to kids watching football now.
It's embarrassing, sometimes, there's a moral argument as well, isn't there? It sounds a bit pompous to say this, but I was always taught to play by the rules. Play, do what you can within the rules. Not try and deceive people. And I think, I don't know if managers do it. But you play. As soon as they get a whiff of if somebody's touched their leg, they're down. And they'll say, well, I had to do it, because then otherwise the referee wouldn't have seen it. But these days with VAR and everything and all the cameras, it's just embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing where they just fall down. I mean, I can't think of anything worse in a game really, than that. You'll get over the top tackles, or what they call, out of control tackles, and they're not good. And but I don't think a lot of them are meant to kind of break somebody's leg.
No.
They're just some clumsy defender or some clumsy striker who can't tackle properly. You know, I don't think there's too much malice. I'm not saying, you know, you'll get the what's that Keane Haaland situation? I don't, you know,
Yeah.
I don't. That was a bit spicy, but I think modern day, you know, I don't think there's that much malice in these things. It's as we said earlier, it's the lack of physicality. You know, it's kind of like it's almost making it trying to make it a non-contact sport. You can't argue against it because it's like it's kind of it's safer. It makes the game safer. But as a spectacle, you know, particularly in England, the English fans have been brought up on this, you know, this physical side of the game, and that they want the technical side, which they've now got, but that's at the expense of the physical side. Yeah, it's kind of, you can go both ways on the argument, really. What's best? You know, I mean, you know, what gets a crowd up sometimes. You know, somebody makes a big tackle. I know that Alan Mullery, when, you know, we were talking earlier about his lack of popularity amongst Spurs supporters at the beginning. But famous story he said that I think it was Bert Murray. He was a winger for Chelsea, and Mullery came. He was told somebody advised him to get stuck in. So he did a big sliding tackle on Bert Murray and knocked him into the stand, I think. And like the crowd loved it. The crowd loved it. They called him they said somebody shouted out, "Go on the tank" or something like that, and everything changed for him. So that got everybody. You know, people love that physicality. You know, that's you know, they love a goal, but they also love that, you know, big tackle or, you know, that kind of that physical element to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we've got a comment from Ian regarding the Scottish caps. If you look at a lot of the great Scottish players, including the great Celtic team of the 60s, 70s, under Steen, they didn't win many caps either. A lot of sectarianism in those selections. That's something I have no idea about. But if you're just joining us, thanks for watching, and thanks for your comments coming in. Make sure you hit the like, make sure you hit the subscribe. We've got Mike Donovan here, who's written a book, Football's Braveheart, Dave Mackay. So we've been talking about that, and we're carrying on talking about that. Anyone who wants to buy the book, here's a link, www.pitchpublishing.co.uk/shop/Football's Braveheart. Highly encourage you to go and get a copy of the book. Let's talk about the big partnership at Spurs that you mentioned, Mackay, Blanchflower, White. Unfortunately, White passed away. It was in I think you mentioned, a terrible 7 months, maybe even been longer for Spurs. But how did that affect, in particular, Dave Mackay and the team, obviously, and who came in as White's replacement there? And obviously, it probably wasn't as great a partnership as those three. I saw you mentioned in the book it was better than the Liverpool partnership of Van Dijk and whoever plays with those two at the time, Matip and Alisson. So yeah, talk a little bit about those three in particular.
Well, those three were the fulcrum. They were the fulcrum of the band. I was going to say fulcrum of the team. I mean, you know, every Spurs player I've spoken to says that. It's kind of Mackay was the main one, but then the partnership between him and Blanchflower was key because they're both wing halves, and Blanchflower was kind of quite adventurous and wasn't that keen on coming back. So like Mackay used to sort of cover for Blanchflower, and I mean, and they just I think what it was, they had a kind of an understanding. It was like a little triangle, you know, with John White. That they kind of had an understanding. John White was the master of kind of picking up, finding space, and they called him the ghost of White Lane. I think it was Dave Mackay who gave him that nickname, but it was like, you didn't see him, and then suddenly pop up in space, get the ball, and then he was like, he would set the attack in motion, and the three of them really, there are lots of players around them, and I suppose you could include Cliff Jones as part of the fulcrum. But it was those three were fundamental because Mackay would pick up the ball or win the ball. I mean, he once described his job as a wing half as just getting the ball, but obviously he was a lot more than that because he used to get the ball and prompt attacks, come back in defence, makes a tackle, score goals. I mean, he did. I mean, he could do everything. I mean, he used to. I mean, his ball skills were absolutely phenomenal. I mean, off the field, he used to have this trick where with a coin, where he used to flick a coin up in the air, put it on his forehead, and slip it down into his top pocket, his knee, and juggle it and flick it onto his heel, and he did all that kind of stuff, And he was, I mean, his ball skills were kind of his skill, his eye high for the ball. So he was he was kind of he had it all. I mean, he had it all really. A lot of it, and that was. But it was it was those three, and then as you alluded to there, that like those three, poor tragic John White. I've been quite friendly with his son Rob, who was helpful with the book. And he got struck by lightning on a golf course. I mean, tragic thing in '64, and then Blanchflower's knee gave way after the European Captain's Cup. I mean, that's another story. The European Captain's Cup win, and then Blanchflower, who's kind of like this kind of cerebral, witty, intelligent figure who's got like he was kind of probably has been rated the best Spurs player ever, but it depends on what polls you read. I mean, Jimmy Greaves is top to another one, but it's those three, and then for all three of them to go within about a year, like Dave Mackay broke his leg, tackle from Noel Campbell, Manchester United at Old Trafford in the European Captain's Cup. And I've seen a video replay of it, and well, I don't really want to comment because obviously Noel has passed on now, but it didn't look the best of challenges. Let's put it that way. And then he kind of it's only we're going back to kind of this kind of what we were talking about earlier about people diving, and then Dave Mackay. I mean, it took two broken legs and a fractured skull to stop Dave Mackay. I mean, it's just,
now it takes a sneeze near a player to stop them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't overstate it really, and I'm sounding like a broken record really, but he was kind of such a kind of force of nature, I mean, if he was in the Spurs team, well, if he was in any team now, he would lift that team up like he lifted Billy Bremner's shirt collar, that day. I mean, he would get him up and at it. You wouldn't want to let him down. If you let him down, you didn't know what you were in store for. It was absolutely phenomenal player. As you probably gathered.
Yeah. We got a question from Brad Matthews here. How you doing, Brad? This is regarding Mackay to Derby, who we went to after Spurs. As a kid, just getting into Spurs, so disappointed, especially when Derby beat us 5-0. Remember the picture in the paper of Mackay and the Derby top celebrating. So, why was it that we sold Mackay to Derby?
Well, Bill Nicholson had made the decision that that Mackay had peaked, that he was finished as a top flight player, and Mackay sort of reluctantly agreed because I think he'd lost a bit of form, and he was getting on a bit, I suppose, and he thought, well, maybe he's got a point. And at that time, I think that Mackay was harbouring thoughts of, well, maybe I can become assistant to Bill or something, something along those lines. And he did. he wasn't going, but he didn't want to upset the apple cart because Eddie Bailey was Bill's assistant at that time, and he wanted, and so that never came to fruition. But then out of the blue, or a lightning bolt from the blue, came quiet Derby manager Brian Clough.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
Let's
kind of
talk. Let's talk about him because in the book I couldn't believe this. Brian Clough is obviously, we've all seen clips of Brian Clough and just a massive character, but he was really nervous to meet him. I mean, that obviously shows the stature of Dave Mackay. That I mean, to shut Brian Clough up, you have to be one hell of a character. But to be nervous to meet him, I couldn't believe that. If I'm being honest with you. Of what I've seen from Brian Clough, anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dave Mackay had this effect of galvanising teams. You know, I mean, with Hearts. I mean, Hearts hadn't won anything for about 50 odd years, and then Mackay came on the scene, and they won everything in sight almost. You know, and then it was the same thing with Spurs. Spurs were going on the verge of being relegated. 2 years later, they won the. They won the double, and then the year after that they won a cup, and then after that they won the European Cup. Yeah, I mean it just, and then they went to Derby, and Derby at that time had no real history of winning much at all. You know, I think they won the FA Cup in '46 or something, and got promoted from the third division or something in the mid '50s. Their history wasn't glistering anyway, and Clough at that stage, you've got to remember that Clough hadn't done anything at that stage as a manager. I mean, he'd started out at Hartlepool after he got his leg broken as a player, which finished him, and then he became manager of Hartlepool and did okay. I think he got linked up with Peter Taylor, I think, and then this chance to go to manage Derby came along, and it was okay. They had a reasonable. You know, I don't know. They didn't do much. They didn't pull up any trees anyway. And then Peter Taylor said to Brian Clough, "Why don't you go for Dave Mackay?" And like to Brian Clough, Dave Mackay was kind of like like I think Brian Clough thought the same as Fergie did. You know that he thought he was like untouchable. You know, mid to lower league team in the second division, you know, getting Dave Mackay, no, absolutely no chance. And anyway, so well, you know, and funny enough, Taylor did admit to Clough afterwards. He said he didn't think he had any chance, but Clough being Clough, as we all know, a lot of bravado about him, but a lot of front. Just drove down to from Derby to Tottenham to the Spurs training ground on the off chance that he might get Dave Mackay to sign for Derby, and he saw Bill Nicholson and Bill said, well, I think you haven't got any chance because Dave was all set to go back to Hearts as player manager. You know, it's all like being done tomorrow, I think it was. And anyway, Clough said, well, you know, was determined not to. And anyway, Bill went away, and Clough waited for Mackay to finish training, sat there on his own, sitting there, and then Dave Mackay wasn't at all interested at first, and then Clough persisted, and so Mackay agreed to have a chat with him. Yeah, I think it was in the restaurant or something, in the players' restaurant, and Clough was evangelical about Derby. You know, he was saying, "Yeah, we're going to win the league. We're going to win all these." And Mackay's first reaction, I guess, was this guy's a bit deluded. You know, I mean, we were Derby, and but he was so convinced. You know, he was so kind of, as I said, evangelical about Derby, and then he made him. Then he made him an offer. No. Anyway, basically the money, I can't remember the figures of the money, but what was offered, and that was sort of interested Mackay, and then he phoned up his wife, said, "Oh, you know, what do you know about this Mackay? Um, sorry, beg your pardon. Let's go back. I missed a bit of the story out actually. Mackay, Clough had, before he came down to White Hart Lane, he'd been phoning. Clough, Mackay's home number. Spoke to Isabel, Mackay's wife, and said, "Oh, can I speak to Dave, please?" And Isabel said, "I'm afraid he's not here. He's away at Hearts, talking to Hearts, because that was when they were talking about making him player manager." And he said, can I have your name, please? He said, "Oh no, I'm not going to give you that." So Mackay, so Clough wouldn't give Isabel. And so he said, well, basically, Isabel thought, well, if you're not going to give me your name, I'm not going to pass the message on to Dave that you've rung. So that was it. So the Dave was up in Scotland, had no idea Clough was been trying to get hold of him, and anyway, so then that's when it prompted Clough to just take the chance and come down to London. And he, as I say, he got his man, and what that did, like it did for Hearts and Spurs, it absolutely galvanised the club. I mean, it absolutely, Derby, as I said to you, a Nowheresville club, hadn't done much. Clough come in, nobody knew who he was. They knew him as a player, but not as a manager, and there he was got Dave Mackay in the team. And Dave Mackay, I mean, and Clough has sort of gone on record as saying this, that he said that he's his best ever signing. Now, this is from a manager, won 2 European Cups, won whatever else, did, and then still talked about today, and he said that Mackay was his best ever signing. And it's true. I mean, his legs might have gone, this is Mackay, but his brain was still intact and his positional sense. So he was there. I mean, Clough had a lot of good young players, but they needed a leader and somebody to point them in the right direction, So Mackay was just there, telling Roy McFarlane, "I'll go here," or whoever it was, go there, and that turned it around. And then at the end of that season, Mackay, who was like thought he might be finished, and Bill Nicholson thought he was finished more or less, was picking up the Football of the Year trophy, with Tony Book, So, I mean, I know it. It's kind of. It's just, as I said to you, it's impossible to overstate this guy. This guy, everywhere he went, it's in terms, he kind of like he galvanised the team and turned them into, he got them promoted in that the season he was there, as the first season he was there, and then a couple of years later they were winning the title, and then he came back as manager and won. That's another story, and won the title. So they've only won the title twice, in the Premier League title, and both times Dave Mackay's been intrinsic, influence on that.
Yeah, you talk about manager there. It's quite odd, I think, for a top player to be a top manager. Obviously, Guardiola is one of the exceptions to that rule. But if you look at Roy Keane, for example, he set such high standards as a player when he had the world-class players with him. But yet, when he goes to someone like an Ipswich or a Sunderland, you can't really demand all of that from them because they're not world-class players. But obviously, Mackay, world-class player, and then he won the league with Derby as well. But I mean, what can you tell us about what he learned, in particular from Bill Nicholson and Clough and Ferguson? I'm assuming he was a manager before Ferguson went stratospheric as a manager, but there must have been some elements that he learned from Ferguson as well. So what can you tell us that he learned from those three that stood him in good stead for a career in management after his playing career was finished?
Yeah, well, as far as Bill Nicholson is concerned, I mean, he was let's start with Tommy Walker at Hearts, who kind of basically nurtured him as a kid. I mean, he was very young when he went into the Hearts first team, and it was just Tommy Walker basically was had the plan to build his team around this youngster. He was waiting for him to mature enough so he could put him in the first team. And then he became captain. And this is another thing. He became captain of all his teams, and that kind of and it was playing the brand of football. I mean, the influence about Bill Nicholson is the brand of football that he wanted to play. I mean, but although he was seemed to be on the surface as Bill Nicholson, a dour Yorkshireman, he was absolutely a romantic about the game. And I mean, he was, if you know this, but Bill Nicholson was part of the Spurs push and run team, which won back-to-back titles in the start of the 50s. A lot of his tactics were based on that team. I mean, that team used to play. It's called push and run. So they played in triangles, really, up the field. So it was like one touch all the way up the field. And there was that, but Bill Nicholson had this mantra where the fans were the most important people at the club. They had to be entertained. It wasn't necessarily a pragmatic kind of look at, and they entertained because the double team, as well as the this push and run influence, also had highly skilled individuals, who basically played for the team, and had a fantastic team spirit. And I think that Mackay took all of that on board. He wanted any team he managed to entertain, he'd far rather go forward, not quite as gung ho as Ozzy Ardua has done back, but he liked his teams to go forward and entertain the crowd. And so that's what he took from Bill Nicholson, and he hugely respected Bill. I mean, all his players. I mean, Bill Nicholson, to my mind, doesn't get spoken about enough. Everybody talks about Fergie and nowadays Guardiola and Clough and everybody else. And really, Bill Nicholson was responsible for creating Spurs' greatest ever team, and he did it, and he rebuilt it and made three. I mean, Fergie did well. He kept recharging his teams, but Bill did three times. He rebuilt his teams, and they won trophies. So he got that from Bill. I mean, as far as Clough's concerned, he just liked they got on really well. I mean, I know Isabel really liked Brian Clough. They used to, he was
once he finally got his name.
Yeah. It's just lovely, and he just liked his kind of like attitude. I mean, Brian Clough. It was funny. The relationship they had was that. I mean, Brian Clough, as you said, was in awe of Dave Mackay. Even as a manager, he used to basically Dave Mackay ran the dressing room. I mean, it was a story. I can't remember who told it, but Clough used to pop his head round the end after a game and ignore all the other players and say to Dave, "Are you all right for next Saturday, Dave?" He goes, "Yeah," and then he's out again. So as long as Dave McClellan, it was kind of, but he just liked him on a personal level, Brian Clough, and as far as, I mean, I don't think Ferguson was necessarily influenced, as you said, because as a manager, because his heyday was after Dave Mackay's heyday, so he wouldn't have known him as a manager, but certainly he grew to. I mean, who couldn't respect Fergie, and the mere fact that Fergie, given his stature in the game, as we've already said, the greatest manager of all time, really, and the fact that he respected Dave Mackay as a player and as a human being. I mean, they were friends. They used to, as I said, the family used to go over there. They used to, so these people, massive names in the game. Dennis Law. I mean, you can, George Best, whoever you mention, really, will tell you if they're still alive or have told when they were alive how what an influence he was. And I think that he took the best of a lot of. I mean, he should have done more in management, really. I mean, that was one surprise, really, because I mean, he managed Derby to the title, and then as far as the directors were concerned, the wheels had come off after about a year, and he was out, and he never really got back in as the big time in England, really, after that, as far as managers is concerned. But that's English football's. They missed out, you know, and he went abroad and became a pioneer manager over there. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what a life, you know.
Yeah, I
Incredible.
mean, just everywhere he went, he won. Everywhere he went, everything he did, he won. It's kind of almost a foreign concept with the footballers of today. You maybe, yeah, I can't really think of anyone who you can kind of compare him to in that respect. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the current team, uh, just talking about their season quickly, how do you think they're doing at the moment? Obviously, the Nuno team not very good. Now we've got a manager who is an elite manager, and there's no two ways about that. And we've had a good run of games. Should have beaten Southampton. Got Watford next, and a massive game in the Carabao Cup final, which I'm convinced Conte is looking at that as a realistic cup to win. But yeah, how do you think our season will shape up?
Well, I mean, for the first time in 60 years, I've been managed to become a season ticket holder, and so I've watched most of the home games. I mean, you know, Manchester City. You thought they beat Manchester City in the first game. I thought, wow, this is good. And
Yeah,
then, of course, it tailed off drastically. It was results wise and performance wise, really. But then they'd say they've got their mojo back a bit, particularly at home. Um,
mm,
and can't say it's definitely made a difference. I mean, I felt for Nuno because he seemed such a nice guy, you know, and
yeah.
I didn't
Just a
know
bit
whether it was
out
the
of his
right
depth, I
decision.
thought.
Yeah, he was such a nice guy and you know, honourable sort of chap. And but he kind of, I used to see him there standing on the side with his arms folded, and you know, you need somebody there. Well, you know, to kind of say, "Come on, lads, you know, let's get going." I don't know. You, as a fan, you like to see your manager involved, and of course, with Conte, I mean, you couldn't
Mm,
be more involved. I mean, he's just, I mean, he's almost on lunacy sometimes. I mean, but he, you know, but that's infectious, isn't it? You know,
yeah, yeah.
you can be demure and cool and you know, Mr. Cool. I think Steve Gerrard's trying to be
You
a
have to
Mr.
back it
Cool.
up with victories and results. So if you're not backing it up with victories, it's gonna, well, unfortunately, like Nuno found out, gonna turn.
Yeah, it's a shame. It was a shame, but you know, as you've said so earlier, you know, people like Skip, you know, have really come on. You know, I mean, you know, I thought, well, I mean, he did pretty well at Norwich, and when he first came in, I thought he's okay, but he's got better and better. And I mean, in the last game I saw against Liverpool, I mean, Winks had a good game, and it was so lovely to see Ali back
Mm,
and playing well. And I thought, you know, I mean, I don't know how much his confidence has been shot by everything that's kind of happened to him, you know, with under Mourinho
mm,
uh, and I thought this guy, you know, yeah, Ali. If we remember that goal against Crystal Palace, and remember other, you know,
mm,
he's a quality player. You know, you don't, you know, class is permanent, isn't it? And I think he's a class player. I mean, clearly his confidence. It must be the confidence thing.
yeah,
And if you're being left out, how can you prove yourself?
yeah.
I must say, I was really pleased to see him back in the fold.
I also think with Ali, it could be, and this can kind of link into Mackay as well in the kind of chalk and cheese. Mackay was, we have to win, we have to win, we have to win. Whereas Ali, I think, has got not seduced, maybe the wrong word, but like he's more interested in his computer games and his sponsorship and his celebrity lifestyle rather than the football. Uh, which whether
Yeah,
Conte, like a Mackay, when he galvanised the teams that he joined, could have that effect on him. I'm not sure, but I think it's a complete turnaround in what football used to be in Mackay's era to what it is now, where it's you were a celebrity in Mackay's era, but you weren't by any stretch. Well, when I finished, I don't need to work a day in my life again. Whereas now, players can retire after 2 years and they never have to work a day in their life again. So I think a lot of players now are doing it for the celebrity and the security. Whereas in Mackay's day, it was all about winning because it wasn't a guarantee on life security. But yeah, so hopefully Conte can get the best out of Ali again. But it's just a kind of chalk and cheese on what football used to be to what it is now, and how the money has suddenly gone slightly up to booming up now, and just it's a bit of a sad state of affairs. But
yeah, well, I mean, it's that's progress. That's kind of the way. But I mean, as say in Mackay's day, you're quite right. I mean, it was. It was the maximum wage was in 20 quid a week. Can you imagine Ronaldo settling for 20 quid a week? It kind of, it was just some, and then the barrier broke down. But even at the end of the career, I think Andy Greaves was about 100 quid a week at the end of his career. I mean, what would he be worth now? I mean, it's pointless to even kind of speculate, but it is a kind of astonishing. Change of lifestyle. As you said, people have to find other work to do. They have to get jobs. They can't survive. They couldn't. They got more than the average wage, but not not anything that's going to allow them to sit back on the beach for the rest of their lives. It's kind of it was a tough thing, and also you're going from like being lauded every week by the fans, and age 30 or whatever it is, then suddenly you've got none of that. So you've got to adapt to that kind of thing. I guess nowadays players do play a bit longer. They've still got that problem, I guess, a little bit later in life, but at least they don't have to think about it. And it's kind of I wouldn't say Ali. I think these players, they've got to be professional, and I think a lot of it's media driven. With social media, you know, uh, is can be a good thing, but generally speaking, I think I'd rather people weren't involved in it and just focused on the job in hand. It seems like a distraction, but I mean, you've got to have your downtime as well. And if Ali wants to go do computer games, I mean, I think Harry Kane's a big gamer. So you've got to have that kind of side to it. So you've got to have a balance. It can't be all football. But it's kind of a different world, isn't it? It's a completely different world where you're getting £1,000 a week for kicking the ball, whereas before you just get 20 quid. And so it kind of gives you different values in life. Does it think that these stars today are being pampered? I mean, a lot of people think that they are, and they probably are, but without them, we wouldn't have a game. So I think if you're a trade unionist, you think, well, once they broke the maximum wage in 1961, I think it was the it opened up a bit of fair play for the players, really. That they were providing the entertainment and getting limited. There's only the Bosman rule came in. Even the contracts were a problem. So now they've got complete freedom, and it's going. I think that I don't know. You harken back to the old days, and where you had to work for stuff, and people who came out of the war and they got memories of the war and they got and the hardships and stuff. And now it all looks all very easy. But I think there's a lot of good paid people in the game, and there's a lot of hard workers. It's kind of we don't know from the outside. We don't know what goes on inside the training ground. The press will maybe get there once a week, press conference, and pick up a few tidbits, but nobody these days goes in. No, has a relationship with the players that we had in our day. I mean, I remember as a fan, I used to be able to go to collect autographs. The players used to go to a local pub, the Bell and Hare, and have a drink. You know, Jimmy Greaves would be sitting there at the bar with Dave Mackay, and they used to have this game about betting. Because Dave Mackay, because he had this aura about him, everybody used to think he was really tall, and they used to bet. They used to have bet with fans saying, "Who do you think's the tallest out of us two?" And they always thought Dave Mackay was the tallest, but he wasn't. He was Jimmy Greaves. But anyway, as far as we used to have access to the fan. So we used to they used to all sign their autographs, and they used to attend functions, and there was a kind of community spirit. They appreciate the community, and a lot of that has gone in football. Where you get driving out in their 4x4s, and avoiding all the fans and not having any contact with the fans. It's a different world, but you don't know, and if you pick up bits and pieces in the media, and he's done this, he's done that, I want to do that. You don't know. I mean, I think Ali seems a good bloke, really. But I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know. I don't know him because I don't get the chance to know him. Anyway, I've probably waffled on too long about that one.
So, in terms of the current crop, Truth 82 says, hopeful that Conte can deliver one of the cups and possibly a top 4 finish, and that's before we do any business in January. I'm of the same opinion there, Truth 82. But yeah, I think we pretty much reached the end there. I don't want to give too much away on the book because there'll be nothing for people to read. But it's been great having you on, Mike. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing stories about Dave Mackay, Ryan Clough, Ferguson, Craig Brown, and talking about the book. It's been great having you on. Thanks so much.
That's all right. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, Chris. And
excellent.
I'll be tuning in regularly from now on.
Excellent. Make sure you hit the like and make sure you hit the subscribe, and that goes for everybody as well. Just before we go, if you haven't already seen or got the book, this is the book we're talking about today, Mike's book, Dave Mackay, Football's Braveheart, and this is where you can buy it. The website is www.pitchpublishing.co.uk/shop/footballs-braveheart. So I highly recommend you getting a copy out of that. Ian, very interesting. Thanks so much, Ian, for all your comments and everyone else who put comments in. Hope you enjoyed it. And make sure you go get the book. We'll be back. I don't know when I'll be back. I think it's the 2nd. We're playing Watford on the 1st, so I think we'll be back on the 2nd, probably about 12:30. And then after that, we'll be back to the normal kind of routine of 8 p.m. on Mondays and 12:30 p.m. on Mondays.
Chris,
on Fridays. I've got that completely wrong.
Chris, can I just say something quickly?
Yeah.
I just say that the book's on sale at the Spurs shop at the ground. So if anybody wants to pick up a copy.
Excellent. Yeah. So So that Pitch Publishing website and the Spurs shop. If you want to get it there as well, if you want to get it without it having to be delivered to you. Truth 82, Happy New Year to you as well, buddy. And so like I say, we're back on the 2nd for the Watford review. Hopefully we can get a win there, get back to winning ways before this massive cup game against Chelsea. And then after that, we'll be back to normal, resuming normal time, 12:30 on Fridays, 8 p.m. on Mondays. Like I say, it's been great having you on, Mike. Thanks so much. Good luck with the book and everything, and hope you enjoy the rest of the season. And until next time, all that's left to say is, come on, you Spurs.
Thank you so much for watching. For everybody who participated in the live chat and added comments, before you go, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Anybody who couldn't watch the live video, you can still catch us on YouTube. Add any comments, suggestions or questions to the comments section on the video. Anybody who's listened to the audio-only podcast, thank you so much for listening. Anybody who wants the audio-only podcast, you get this wherever you get your podcast from. Alternatively, if you go to Twitter, @Talk Tottenham, you'll find all the information there. We'll be back soon. We're live Mondays, 8 p.m, Fridays, 12:30 UK time. Until then, come on, you Spurs!